I'm going to read out the definitions relatively quickly, and then if you feel like you need to pause it, please do so. Inductive reasoning is reasoning that uses a number of specific examples to arrive at a conclusion. A conjecture is a concluding statement reached using inductive reasoning. A counterexample is a false example showing that a conjecture is not true. You only need one counterexample to prove that. Deductive reasoning uses facts, rules, definitions, or properties to reach logical conclusions from given statements. Pause it now if you need to write these down. We are now getting into a few of these examples. So our first example asks us to write a conjecture about the next number in the sequence 1, 3, 9, 27, 81. We could say that I believe the next number will be 243 because each previous number was multiplied by 3. So 81 times 3 would get us 243. This is a very simple conjecture. The next one says, write a conjecture about the number of small squares in the next figure. So we have 1, we have 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, we have 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So our next one, I would say, the next figure will have 16 small squares because each one is the figure number squared. So we had 1 squared gets us 1, 2 squared got us 4, 3 squared got us 9. We are now going to write a couple conjectures about statements more based on geometry. So this one says that angle ABC and angle DBE are vertical angles. What we can say from this, from our experience, every vertical angle I've seen so far that we've done has been congruent to each other. So we could say angle ABC and angle DBE are congruent because every pair of vertical angles has been congruent. Our next one is talking about angle 1 and angle 2 forming a right angle. So from this, I could definitely say angle 1 and angle 2 are complementary because they form a right angle. So any two angles that add up to 90 are complementary, but since 1 and 2 form a right angle, and right angles are 90 degrees, we could say they're complementary, right? Does that make sense? In our next example here, we are trying to find a counterexample to show the conjecture is false. So we could draw this many ways to make it true, but we only need one way to show that it is false. So if we said, if AB is congruent to BC, then B is the midpoint of AC. So we're asking ourselves, is it possible to draw a diagram with AB congruent to BC such that B is not the midpoint? So we can draw out our diagram here. If we say A, B, and then we have B, C going up that way, and these are congruent to each other, is B the midpoint of AC? Clearly here, it is not, because AC isn't even drawn in as a segment and AB is congruent to BC. So as long as we can get one counterexample, we could prove our conjecture false. So some of these we've already talked about, these following statements that we are completing using deductive reasoning. So A says if two angles are vertical angles, we are going to say then they are congruent. This is what we talked about on the front. So if two angles are vertical angles, then they are congruent. If two angles, forgot that there, sorry guys. If two angles are supplementary, then they add up to 180 degrees, right? If two angles are supplementary, then they add up to 180 degrees. The next one we could say, if two angle measures sum to 90 degrees, then they are complementary. And our final one says, if two angles are a linear pair of angles, then they are supplementary. Supplementary. If two angles are a linear pair of angles, then they're supplementary. So if two angles form a line, then they have to add up to 180 degrees, which is our definition of supplementary.